Chapter 1. The floor smelled of blood. My blood. I had been scrubbing for hours. It had seeped into the cracks of the marble, a dark stain that no amount of soap could wash away. My hands were split open, knuckles raw, wrists trembling each time I dipped the brush back into the bucket. The water had long since turned pink. I'd been scrubbing since sundown, but Lady Merva, my stepmother, wasn't satisfied until she could see her reflection between the cracks.
"Slower!"
she hissed, her voice sharp as the heel of her shoe that clicked toward me.
"You missed a spot, you filthy little creature."
The wooden handle struck the back of my neck. Not hard enough to kill, just enough to make me bow lower. I didn't cry anymore. The tears had dried years ago, the night my father died, and Lady Merva took everything he left behind. The house, the servants, the name Evermere. Now I was only Averlin, the cursed girl no one dared to acknowledge. My stepmother spun a rumor that the crescent mark on my shoulder was a curse, and the curse killed my father. The servants believed her. Of course, they always did. It was easier to fear a girl than question the woman who paid their wages. They started crossing themselves when I entered a room, whispering prayers under their breath as if my shadow alone could infect them. I stopped eating at the same table, stopped speaking unless spoken to, stopped existing anywhere the light reached. By the time I turned 15, no one dared touch me, not even to hand me a plate. The house that once rang with laughter became a tomb of murmurs and footsteps that fell silent whenever I walked by. The mark pulsed beneath my skin even now, a faint throb beneath the rags of my dress. Sometimes, when the nights were quiet and the moon was high, it burned hot enough to make me tremble. I'd press my palm against it until the pain faded, afraid someone might see the glow seeping through the fabric. Once, I tried to scrub it away. I used lye and salt, praying that if I peeled the cursed skin off, maybe the world would stop hating me. But the crescent only bled, then healed, pale as ever. It was the one thing I couldn't wash clean. Lady Merva liked to remind me of that.
"You should be grateful I keep you alive,"
she'd purr, her jeweled fingers tracing the air where the mark lay hidden.
"If the Alphas ever found out what you were, they'd tear you apart just to see what color your blood runs."
And sometimes when she was drunk, she'd lean close and whisper,
"Perhaps I'll sell you to them one day. You might finally be worth something."
The words used to terrify me. Now they only made me tired. There was a time when I tried to understand her. Lady Merva, the woman who became my stepmother and turned our home into a mausoleum of polished marble. She'd been beautiful once, or so the portraits said. Her smile was sharp and bright, the kind that made men mistake venom for charm. After the war, my father was no longer the man the kingdom sang about. The crown had no use for heroes once the blood dried. We lived on borrowed coin and borrowed hope, and Merva saw it, saw him. She visited often, dressed in widow's silk, speaking sweetly of her late husband's investments, and of rebuilding the Evermere fortune. I remember her laugh, like the edge of a blade wrapped in honey. Within months, they were married. Within a year, she had replaced every servant loyal to my mother and filled the halls with her own. My father, who once trained knights, now hosted her parties and let her paint over my mother's crest with her own. I remembered the way she touched my father's arm at dinner, the way he smiled even when the light in his eyes dimmed. I thought she made him happy, but happiness isn't what Merva desired. She wanted power, coin, title, land, and my father was simply her key. When he died, she didn't shed a tear. She wore mourning lace, yes, but her eyes gleamed as though she'd won. And perhaps she had. Her daughters, Larvina and Riesla, were her mirrors, born from her first marriage, both carved from vanity and spite. Larvina, the elder, had her mother's calculating beauty. Her hair was the color of burnished copper, her lips painted crimson every morning, even when no one would see. She practiced smiles in the mirror until they looked natural, then used them like weapons to her. Kindness was weakness, and cruelty was proof of strength. Riesla, younger by 2 years, wasn't cruel, but she was hollow. She copied Larvina in everything. How she dressed, how she laughed, even how she hated me. When Larvina sneered, Riesla giggled. When Larvina struck, Riesla watched. They called me Beast or Moonrot. They hid my shoes in the well, poured ink into my wash water, and whispered prayers that the goddess would cleanse the house of my filth. Once, Larvina caught me staring at the moon through the window and said,
"Careful, Avalyn. If you keep gazing at the moon like that, you'll turn into one of those beasts Mother speaks of. But maybe that's what you already are."
Riesla giggled behind her hand, and they left me there, staring at my own reflection in the glass, half light, half shadow, a ghost of the girl I used to be. I tried to hate them. Truly, I did. But hatred requires energy, and mine had long since burned out. What remained was quieter, something dull and heavy like dust settling over old bones. Sometimes I wondered if they even remembered who I was before all this. The girl who once sat beside them at the piano, who braided Riesla's hair, who helped Larvina choose ribbons for festivals. But I suppose it's easy to forget someone once you decide they're no longer human. Now, I was nothing more than the thing in their house that bled and cleaned and kept breathing, and even that, it seemed, offended them. The house had gone still, except for the faint hum of voices carrying down the hall. I'd finished scrubbing the steps and was gathering the bucket when laughter drifted through the half-open dining room doors. Lady Mirva never laughed softly. Her joy came in sharp, brittle bursts that cut through silence like broken glass. Curiosity tugged at me before sense could stop it. I crept closer, staying in the shadow between the doorway and the wall. From here I could see the glimmer of candlelight on crystal, and hear the lilting tones of her daughters, Larvina and Riesla, as they lingered over their late supper.
"The moon's gala is tomorrow night,"
Larvina was saying, twirling her wine glass so the dark liquid shimmered in the light.
"and Alpha Darek of the North will be there."
Riesla sighed dreamily.
They say he's half beast, half god. Imagine being chosen by the goddess herself to stand beside him beneath the moon.
Lady Mirva gave a hum of amusement.
Chosen? No, child. Men like that don't leave fate to chance. They choose who makes them look powerful, and that is what we shall offer.
Larvina leaned forward, her copper hair catching the glow.
"You think he'll notice me?"
How could he not?
Her mother purred.
You have beauty, breeding, and the right amount of submission when it suits you. The goddess favors those who know their place.
Riesla giggled, trying to mimic her sister's poise.
If the goddess truly chooses, perhaps she'll pick me instead.
Mirva's smile sharpened.
She chooses strength, not softness. But you may still catch the eye of a lesser alpha if you smile prettily enough.
They laughed together then. 3 chiming voices, rich with cruelty and confidence. I stayed very still in the dark, fingers tightening around the rim of the bucket until my knuckles whitened. The moon's gala. It was all anyone in the kingdom spoke of this week, the sacred night when alphas from every province gathered beneath the full moon to renew their vows and let the goddess reveal their fated mates. Once, when I was younger, I used to dream about it. I imagined standing among silk-clad nobles, my father's crest gleaming proudly on my gown, but that was before everything burned. Before I became the girl people crossed themselves to avoid. I pressed my palm against my shoulder where the crescent mark throbbed beneath my dress. It had begun to ache again, as if mocking me. Someone like me could never be chosen. No goddess would claim a cursed girl who bled into her own mop water. Their laughter swelled behind the door again, Larvina declaring she would wear silver to match the alpha's eyes, Mirva reminding them both that only a fool believed in love at first sight. I turned away before I heard more. The bucket sloshed against my leg as I carried it down the corridor, each step echoing like a reminder, even if the goddess herself descended tomorrow night, she would never look for me. Chapter 2. Everything was buzzing and busy. The manor felt alive in a way it never did for me, every corridor humming with footsteps, every voice sharpened by excitement. I could hear Larvina screaming from upstairs about her hair, and Risla arguing with the tailor over the color of her gown. Even the servants were giddy. Some of them had been chosen to serve at the castle during the moon's gala. Their whispers floated through the hall like songbirds, snippets of gossip, promises of glory, and rumors of which noble families had already arrived. And of course, the noble families themselves were invited. I tried to pretend I didn't care, tried to keep my head down, my hands busy, my heart quiet. But I did care. I could lie to Merva, to the servants, to anyone who saw me, but not to myself. I wanted to see the lights of the castle, to stand beneath the full moon and breathe the same air as those who belonged there. I wanted to know what it felt like to be seen. So I hurried through my chores, faster than usual, my heartbeat tripping over itself with foolish hope. If everything gleamed, if the house was spotless and the dinner prepared, maybe, just maybe, she'd let me come. Not to dance, of course, not to be seen, but to stand in the corner, to glimpse the lights of the castle and hear the music through the open doors. It was a childish thought, one I scolded myself for even entertaining, but still I couldn't help it. I scrubbed the dishes until my fingers pruned, swept soot from the hearth, and polished the silver Merva would brag belonged to her ancestors. The whole house was chaos. Dresses swished through doorways, perfumes mingled with dust, and Lady Merva's voice carried over it all like the crack of a whip.
Risla, stop fidgeting. And Larvina, gods, hold still or I'll have the maid cut off that hair entirely.
Her shrill tone made me flinch even from the kitchen. I stacked the last of the plates and leaned against the counter, letting the heat from the hearth wash over me. My reflection wavered in the pot beside me, a tired face, a loose braid, a girl no one would ever look twice at. Somewhere outside, a carriage rumbled past, wheels crunching over gravel. Laughter echoed faintly from beyond the windows. The world was moving on without me. Still, I found myself glancing toward the doorway, waiting, hoping, praying that maybe this once she'd look my way and say, "Averlin, get ready. You're coming too." I had come up with a plan. A foolish one, maybe, but it was all I had. I would tell my stepmother that I could go as an assistant to help Larvina and Risla with their gowns or fetch whatever they needed. If I made myself useful enough, perhaps she would see no harm in bringing me along. With that fragile hope burning in my chest, I worked faster, wiping every surface until it shone, sweeping the halls until not a speck of dust dared remain. The scent of polish and lavender filled the air, the light catching on the silver I'd laid out perfectly. After cleaning, I dressed in the best gown I owned, a faded blue dress that once belonged to my mother. The seams were frayed and the fabric hung a little too loosely around my shoulders, but it was the only thing that still made me feel human. I brushed out my hair as best I could and stood before the cracked mirror, trying to summon courage from the reflection that barely looked like me. By the time I reached the parlor, Larvina and Risla were still bickering. Larvina stood in front of the mirror, holding a white flower to her chest.
"I'm wearing it!"
She snapped.
"It suits me better."
Risla rolled her eyes.
It's just a flower. You're not the only one the Alpha will look at.
Their mother sat near the window, her jeweled fingers tracing the edge of a wine glass. The sunlight caught her rings, scattering red across the floor like drops of blood. I hesitated in the doorway, heart hammering. "Stepmother," I began softly. All three heads turned toward me. Larvina's lip curled first.
"What are you doing here? You know you're not allowed in this room."
Her gaze swept over me, disdain sharpening her tone.
"And why are you dressed like that? Is that supposed to be your best? You look like a beggar pretending it's silk."
Risla's laugh followed, high and mean. I ignored them and kept my eyes on Lady Merva. She didn't speak at first, only regarded me with that unreadable stillness that made my stomach twist. I came to ask. My voice faltered, but I forced the words out. If I could go to the gala as their assistant, to help Larvina and Riesla with whatever they need, to make sure everything runs smoothly. Silence stretched between us. The only sound was the soft rustle of Larvina's gown as she turned to glare at me. For a moment, Merva didn't move. Then, to my astonishment, her lips curved faintly.
Very well,
She said.
It might be amusing to have you there.
Larvina's eyes widened.
Mother, no! She'll embarrass us!
Riesla nodded quickly,
Yes, she will. She'll ruin everything.
but Merva only waved a hand, the faint smile never leaving her lips.
If Avelyn wishes to come, let her. She can be useful for once.
Her gaze flicked to me, sharp as a blade.
Be down here by dusk.
I thanked her quickly, keeping my expression composed until the door closed behind me. Then I nearly laughed from disbelief, a laugh that caught somewhere between joy and tears. For the first time in years, I had been granted permission. I ran up to my room, though room was generous. It was a narrow space tucked beneath the attic stairs, just large enough for a cot, a chest, and a sliver of moonlight through a crack in the roof. Still, it felt like heaven that night. I smoothed out my faded blue dress once more and imagined how it might look beneath candlelight. I tried to picture the castle, the chandeliers, the laughter, the music drifting through the air like a dream I even dared to imagine catching the eye of a nobleman, someone kind, someone who might look past the rags and see me. And that was all I did until the sky began to dim. Hope had made me foolishly patient. When dusk finally arrived, I hurried down the stairs, my pulse racing with anticipation. The parlor was empty, the gowns, the perfumes, the laughter, all gone. Hello? My voice echoed faintly. The air smelled of rosewater and burnt candle wax, the kind that lingered after a room had been hastily vacated. A half-empty wineglass sat forgotten on the table, a shawl draped over the chair. Everything looked as if they had only just been there, as if I'd arrived a moment too late. My heart quickened. Maybe they're waiting outside, I whispered, smoothing the wrinkles from my dress before hurrying toward the door. The corridor beyond was quiet, too quiet. The only sound came from the ticking of the clock in the hall, each second loud enough to feel like mockery. I reached for the handle. The door slammed before I could touch it. The sound cracked through the air like thunder, the gust of it brushing my hair across my face. I froze, staring at the wood as my pulse thundered in my ears. Then came the click, cold, final. Lady Merva? I called, trying to keep my voice steady. It's me, Avelyn. Laughter answered, my sister's laughter. Through the door, Larvina's voice rang sharp and cruel.
Did you really think you'd be allowed to go, curse girl?
My breath caught. Please. Then came my stepmother's voice, calm and venomous.
You truly thought a filthy creature like you deserved to stand among nobles? Keep dreaming, Avelyn. You'll stay in there until we return. And when you do, you'll help undress my daughters, as you should.
Their laughter echoed once more, fading down the hall until the house fell silent. I banged on the door until my hands stung, until my voice cracked, but no one came. The silence swallowed me whole. Then the tears came, hot, blinding, unrelenting. I sank to the floor, pressing my palms to my face, hating myself for believing, even for a moment, that kindness could still exist here. I'm such a fool, I whispered. What made me think I could belong anywhere, that I could ever be chosen? My words trembled into the stillness, and then, as if in answer, the crescent mark on my shoulder began to pulse. At first, it was faint, then stronger, hotter. Not now, I gasped, clutching at it, but the light beneath my skin only grew brighter, spilling like moonfire through the torn fabric of my sleeve. I pressed my hand over it, biting back a sob. "Please, not now," I whispered, shaking my head. But it only grew hotter, a strange warmth spreading through my chest. The air in the room shifted, thickening, humming, as if the walls themselves were breathing. A soft glow seeped through the fabric of my sleeve, silver and steady like moonlight breaking through clouds. Dust stirred on the floor. The shadows bent. Then came a sound, low and resonant, almost like a heartbeat, echoing through the room. My breath caught. The mark burned again, and suddenly the lock on the door rattled. Once, twice. Then, with a sharp crack, it burst open. Wind swept through the room, though every window was shut. It circled me, lifting my hair, tugging at my dress. The light from the crescent on my shoulder brightened until it painted the walls in silver. I stared at the door, the lock still smoking, disbelief freezing me in place. Slowly, I stepped forward. The mark had cooled now, its glow fading back beneath my skin, but I could still feel its rhythm calm, steady, alive. I didn't know how or why it happened, only that it had listened to me. And for the first time in my life, something had answered. Chapter 3. Now that I was out of the room, I needed to find a horse, or a carriage, anything that could take me to the castle before midnight. I couldn't go dressed like this, I would be a laughingstock. But I couldn't steal my sister's gowns either. Merva would know, and I'd never make it out of the manor alive if they discovered me. So I had no choice but to dress as what I already was, a servant. With my half-mask clutched in hand, I crept into the servants' quarters. The narrow room smelled of soap and straw. Trunks stacked along the walls I searched until I found a clean gray dress with an apron still folded neatly beside it. It wasn't beautiful, but it was plain enough to go unnoticed. I tied the apron around my waist, pulled my hair back, and told myself it would have to do. I didn't understand what had just happened upstairs, how the lock had burst open, or why the mark on my shoulder still throbbed faintly beneath the fabric. But right now, I didn't care. The moon had given me a chance, and I wasn't going to waste it. I slipped out the back door and hurried down the narrow path toward the village. The night air was sharp, with wood smoke and distant music from the castle on the hill. Every step made my pulse pound faster. By the time I reached the village square, my lungs burned. Lanterns swung from iron hooks, their flames fluttering in the wind. Carriages rattled past, wheels splashing through puddles, drivers shouting to one another as they ferried guests to the gala. I spotted a lone carriage near the fountain, its horses stamping impatiently. The coachman was walking away, adjusting his gloves. "Excuse me!" I called, running to him. "Please, wait!" He turned, startled, as I pressed a small coin into his hand, my last. He blinked down at it.
"Oh, I'm not a—"
He stopped mid-sentence, frowning slightly and looking down at his attire. Then he nodded slowly.
"It's all right. I'll take you. Where to?"
"To the gala," I said, breathless. His brows lifted.
"You're going like that?"
I crossed my arms. "Yes, I am a servant." He studied me for a long moment, skeptical.
"Strange. I just saw the other servant's carriage pass by a moment ago."
"I was running late," I replied quickly. "They left without me." He opened his mouth to protest, but I cut him off. "Please, can you just take me? I'm in a rush." Something flickered in his eyes. Confusion, then a reluctant nod.
"All right,
He said at last, climbing up to the seat.
climb in."
I did, clutching the sides of the worn carriage as the wheels began to turn. The horses snorted, their breath ghosting in the moonlight, and as the village fell away behind us, the mark on my shoulder warmed again, faint, steady, as though it approved. The road wound upward through the dark hills until the castle came into view. At first, it was only a distant shimmer, faint lights flickering against the horizon, but as the carriage climbed higher, the full sight of it unfolded before me. The royal castle rose out of the night like something carved from moonlight itself. Towers spiraled toward the stars, their windows glowing with gold music drifted faintly from within. Violins, laughter, the muffled rhythm of dancing feet. The air shimmered with it, carrying the scent of roses and wine. I pressed my hand to the window, breath fogging the glass. For a heartbeat, it didn't feel real. It was the kind of place you dreamed of when your world was made of ash and stone. Then the carriage slowed, wheels crunching against the gravel path at the far end of the grounds. The coachman pulled the reins, and the horses came to a stop beside a smaller gate lined with ivy and shadow. He turned slightly in his seat.
We're here.
He said.
That's the servants' entrance, in case you needed direction.
His tone sharpened.
But I'm sure you already know, since you claim to be a servant and all.
Something in the way he said it made my stomach twist. Not cruel exactly, but mocking, like he knew more than he let on. I stepped down carefully, clutching my skirt as my boots met the cold stone. "Thank you," I murmured. The coachman only tipped his hat, the faintest smirk on his lips, before flicking the reins and driving off into the darkness. The castle loomed ahead, magnificent and terrible all at once. Lanterns glowed along the servants' corridor, their light glinting off the polished brass door handles. I drew a steadying breath and walked toward it. A guard in polished armor stood by the door, posture stiff, eyes alert. He raised a hand as I approached.
Name and estate?
I straightened my shoulders, trying to sound like I belonged. Emery, from the Evermere estate. I'm working as a servant tonight. He frowned, flipping through the parchment in his hand. For a moment, I thought my lie had failed. But then his brow relaxed, and he gave a short nod.
Your name's here,
He said.
Why didn't you arrive with the others?
I did, I answered quickly, forcing a polite smile. But I stepped outside to take care of something. He grunted, barely interested.
Go on in then.
I dipped my head in thanks and slipped past him into the corridor beyond, my heart hammering as the heavy door shut behind me. The hum of voices and the faint echo of music filled the air. The warmth of the castle washed over me, and for the first time in my life, I stood inside a world I had only ever imagined from afar. The door swung open, and sound hit me like a wave. The servants' hall was a storm of motion, voices shouting orders, footsteps pounding against the polished floor, trays clattering, gowns and uniforms brushing past in a blur of color. Steam rose from the kitchens beyond, thick with the smell of roasted meat, honeyed fruits, and wine. Everyone was rushing somewhere. No one had time to question me. I slipped between them, head bowed, and reached for the nearest tray stacked high with glasses of sparkling amber wine. My hands trembled slightly as I steadied it. If I looked like I belonged, maybe no one would notice me at all. I followed the current of movement through a side corridor, heart pounding harder with every step. The noise grew louder, laughter, music, the soft rise and fall of an orchestra, until I stepped through an archway and froze. The sight before me stole the breath from my lungs. The main ballroom stretched wider than I could have imagined, every surface gleaming as if carved from starlight. A chandelier of pure crystal hung above, scattering 1,000 fragments of light that danced across the marble floor. The walls shimmered with silver drapery, and candlelight gold filigree curled around tall windows where moonlight streamed in like liquid glass. And the people, gods, the people. The nobles glided across the floor like living jewels, their laughter ringing soft and elegant beneath the music. Every face was hidden behind a mask, some feathered, some gilded, others shaped like wolves or stags, their eyes glinting beneath intricate designs. The women's gowns rippled with every color imaginable: sapphire, rose, emerald, gold, each movement catching the light like fire. The men wore polished uniforms or coats of deep velvet, masks etched in patterns of silver leaves and stars. The air shimmered with perfume and magic. I could almost taste it, sweet, dizzying, unreal. I stood there for a long moment, tray balanced in my shaking hands, afraid to breathe too loudly. I'd never seen anything so beautiful, so unreachable, and yet, for the first time, I was inside it. A pair of masked nobles brushed past me, their laughter soft and conspiratorial. Another servant nodded for me to move, and I did, weaving through the glittering crowd like a ghost among gods. My reflection flashed briefly across the mirrored columns. Plain dress, plain hair, a thin mask barely hiding my face, and I felt the ache of it, sharp and undeniable. I shouldn't have been here. But the moon had opened the door for me, and I wasn't about to turn back. As I moved further into the ballroom, the orchestra swelled, the floor shifting with dancers. Above the music, a new sound began to rise, the quiet hush that swept through the crowd when someone important entered. The air grew tense, every eye in the ballroom turned toward the grand staircase. The music faltered, notes hanging in the air like held breath. Conversations hushed. Even the nobles who had been laughing moments ago froze mid-gesture, gazes fixed on the man descending the marble steps. He moved with a kind of effortless authority, the kind that didn't need to be announced. His presence alone seemed to bend the room around him. I didn't know who he was at first, but the ripple of whispers answered for me.
It's Alpha Derek!
The Alpha of the North.
Look at him. He's even taller than they said.
Excitement spread like fire through the crowd. I caught fragments of admiration and envy, soft gasps from women behind jeweled masks, and the low murmurs of men gauging power Alpha Darek. I'd heard his name often enough. In my sister's gossip, in Merva's ambitious sighs. The most eligible, heartbreakingly handsome bachelor in the kingdom, the ruthless commander, the wolf blessed by the goddess herself. They had spoken of him as if he were some myth, part beauty, part danger. Seeing him now, I wasn't sure what the fuss was about. He was tall, yes, broad-shouldered beneath his dark coat, his movements measured and unsure. But was he unbelievably handsome? Hardly. His mask covered half his face, carved from black metal traced with silver filigree, hiding whatever expression lay beneath. Honestly, even the coachman who'd driven me here had a more handsome face. Still, the room held its breath when he paused at the final step, and the way the nobles seemed to shrink in his presence. He surveyed the crowd once, slow and unreadable, before offering the faintest nod. The orchestra resumed instantly, as if afraid to keep him waiting. Around me, the world seemed to exhale, laughter starting again, the dance resuming, but a strange quiet lingered in my chest. I tightened my grip on the tray and told myself not to stare. I drifted back into the crowd, keeping my tray steady and my eyes down. No one paid attention to a servant carrying drinks, and for once that suited me perfectly. The ballroom felt like a living dream. Music swelling, gowns swirling, the air alive with perfume and chatter. Everywhere I turned, nobles were laughing too loudly, smiling too widely, pretending not to be watching the Alpha. I caught snatches of conversation as I moved.
He hasn't asked anyone to dance yet.
My daughter would be perfect for him. She's been trained in every northern custom.
The goddess herself would weep if he left unpaired.
I nearly smiled. Mothers and daughters fluttered like jeweled moths near the edge of the dance floor, all vying to be the one he noticed. I could almost hear Merva saying the same things at home, plotting which of her daughters would snare him first. For the first time that night, I allowed myself to enjoy it. The music, the shimmer of candlelight, the strange sense of belonging that came from being invisible in plain sight. Then I saw her, Riesla. She was standing near the musicians, her lilac gown glittering in the chandelier light, scanning the crowd with sharp, searching eyes. My stomach tightened. If she saw me here? I turned quickly, heart pounding, slipping between two clusters of guests, and ran straight into her mother, Lady Merva. She was speaking with a group of noble women, her jeweled hand resting elegantly on her fan. When her gaze flicked toward me, my breath caught. I froze. For a heartbeat, our eyes met, hers narrowing slightly, mine wide with panic, and I knew I couldn't move forward. Not without giving myself away, so I did the only thing I could. I stepped back, but I wasn't looking. My heel caught the edge of the carpet, and I stumbled, straight into someone solid. The tray tilted, crystal glasses sliding, liquid shimmering in the candlelight before spilling in a cascade of gold. The crowd gasped. The wine splashed across a dark coat, running down polished buttons and black fabric. I looked up, mortified, and met the cold, unreadable gaze behind a black and silver mask. Alpha Derek. For a moment, the room seemed to stop. The music faltered again, all eyes turning toward us. I could feel my heartbeat in my throat, the heat rushing to my face, my words tangled somewhere between my lips, and shame. I wanted to apologize. Gods, I needed to. But my breath caught halfway through the motion. Because beneath the shame, beneath the weight of 100 eyes burning into me, I felt it. The crescent mark on my shoulder, it flared. A sharp heat bloomed under my skin, pulsing in rhythm with my racing heart. I pressed my arm against it, willing it to stop. Not now. Please, not now. It always reacted to my emotions, anger, fear, humiliation, but this time it was stronger, brighter. I could feel the warmth spreading up my neck, the faint hum of power that threatened to burst through the seams of my sleeve. If it glowed here, in this room, under this light, they'd all see it. The nobles would whisper, the guards would drag me out, and Merva would know exactly who I was. I dared a glance up at Darek. He hadn't moved. The wine clung to his coat, glinting in the chandelier's light, but his mask hid whatever expression might have flickered beneath it. He only stood there, still as stone, watching me. I could hear Riesla's laughter somewhere in the crowd, the same cruel sound that had haunted me my whole life. I couldn't stay here, not for another breath, so I did the only thing I could. I ran. The tray crashed to the floor as I pushed through the wall of silk and perfume, my steps echoing off the marble. Gasps followed me, a few startled cries, but I didn't look back. My heart pounded too loudly in my ears, drowning out everything but the sound of my own panic. Servants turned as I darted past them, skirts brushing against the cold stone of the side hall. The music behind me resumed, faint and distant, as if the ballroom had swallowed me whole and moved on. The mark still burned, searing through the thin fabric, its rhythm wild and uneven. Not angry now, but alive. I didn't know where I was running to, only that I had to get away before the light found me. Chapter 4. I found the exit. The night air hit me like a blessing, cold, sharp, and alive. My heart was still hammering, my breath shallow as I stumbled down the servants' path, my skirts dragging across the gravel. And then I saw him, the coachman, the same one who'd brought me here. He was leaning casually against the carriage, arms crossed, as though he'd been waiting all along.
Well,
he said when he saw me.
That was fast.
I froze, halfway between disbelief and relief. The world inside that castle still pulsed behind me. Music, laughter, the echo of my humiliation. But here, under the quiet stars, everything felt still again. I didn't ask why he'd waited. I didn't have the strength. Please, I said instead. Take me away. He tilted his head, studying me for a moment before climbing onto the driver's seat.
As you wish.
The horses started forward, hooves striking softly against the cobblestone road. The castle lights faded behind us, swallowed by the mist that rolled down from the hills. I sat in silence, clutching my trembling hands in my lap. My mark had stopped flaring the moment I stepped outside, though it still pulsed faintly, steady, insistent, like it was reminding me it was still there. The cool night air soothed the heat, but not the ache. By the time we reached the village square, the streets were nearly empty. Lanterns flickered low, and the sound of the horses' breathing filled the silence. The coachman hopped down and offered his hand to help me. I hesitated, then took it. His grip was warm, grounding. Once my feet met the cobblestones, I realized I was crying. Not the frantic sobs from before. This was quieter, heavier. He noticed. His brows furrowed slightly.
So, your little fake servant mission failed?
A small, broken laugh slipped out before I could stop it. Miserably. He watched me for a moment, then asked softly,
Why pretend to be a servant?
I don't know why I answered him. Maybe it was the gentleness in his voice, or the way he didn't sound like he was mocking me. Maybe it was just that no one had asked me anything without wanting something in return, so I told him. I told him how after my father died, my stepmother stripped me of everything, my name, my home, my dignity, until I was little more than a ghost serving her household. How I wasn't allowed to leave, how I'd begged to attend the gala only to be locked away like an animal. I didn't tell him about my mark. That was the one thing I couldn't share, because I didn't want him to see me as cursed. He didn't interrupt. He didn't pity me, either. He just listened, his expression unreadable under the soft lantern light. When I finally fell silent, I managed to ask, Why did you wait for me? You didn't have to. He shrugged, a faint smile tugging at the corner of his mouth.
I had nothing better to do.
Then his gaze flicked to me, steady and knowing.
And besides, I was curious about the girl who's definitely not a servant.
I smiled. A real one this time, soft and tired. What about you? I asked, brushing a tear from my cheek. What's your story, coachman? He leaned back against the carriage wheel, the faintest grin ghosting across his lips.
My story?
He considered for a moment, then exhaled, the sound half a sigh, half a laugh.
Well, I'll never see you again, so what's the harm in telling you?
His eyes lifted toward the sky where the stars shimmered faintly above the rooftops.
The people around me want me to marry.
He said quietly.
But I can't.
Why not?
Because
he replied, his tone turning distant, almost fragile.
I have a curse.
I blinked, surprised. A curse? He nodded once, his expression unreadable.
No one around me knows about it, so I keep it to myself. It's easier that way.
The words hung between us, soft, solemn, almost too close to my own truth. I opened my mouth to ask what kind of curse he meant, but before I could, the night cracked open with a burst of light. Fireworks bloomed above the castle in the distance, scattering the sky with silver and blue. The final display. The gala was ending. He turned his gaze toward the glowing horizon, the brief flicker of the fireworks painting his face in gold.
Looks like the party's over,
he said. I watched the last sparks fade against the clouds and felt the ache of reality returning, cold and heavy. Whatever strange spell the night had cast between us was slipping away with the dawn. I rose to leave, brushing the dirt from my skirt, but before I could take a step, the coachman caught my hand.
Wait,
he said softly. His grip was warm, grounding, and for a heartbeat I forgot everything else. Then, over his shoulder, I saw it. A carriage, their carriage, rolling down the road from the castle, its lanterns glowing in the night. Inside, I caught the glint of jewels, the shimmer of silk, my breath hitched. Merva, Larvina, Riesla, they were already on their way back. How are they here so soon? I whispered, ducking instinctively behind the side of the coach. My pulse raced so hard it hurt. They must have left before the gala ended. Panic hit me all at once, cold and suffocating. And of course my mark responded. The crescent burned beneath my dress, flaring bright enough to pierce through the fabric. I yanked my hand from the coachman's grasp and pressed my palm over it, trying to hide the light before he noticed.
Are you all right?
He asked, stepping forward. I have to go, I blurted, already backing away.
Wait.
But I didn't. I turned and ran, the sound of his voice fading behind me. The road blurred beneath my feet as I cut through the narrow alleyways of the village, my heart pounding like a war drum. They couldn't see me here. If Merva or my sisters saw me outside before them, everything would unravel. The main road curved toward the manor, wide and well lit, the path their carriage would take. But I knew a faster way, a forgotten shortcut through the trees in the back gardens. I hadn't stepped beyond the walls in 4 years, but my feet still remembered. It was the same path I'd taken earlier when I escaped, back when the door first broke open. The grass was damp beneath my shoes, the branches clawing at my arms, but I didn't stop running until the manor's silhouette rose ahead. Tall and cruel against the moonlight, I slipped through the servants' gate and up the narrow stairs. Inside, the house was still. Then I saw it. The broken door, splintered at the lock. My stomach dropped. If Merva saw that, she'd know instantly what had happened. I scanned the hall, mind racing. Near the storeroom, I spotted a loose nail and a half-rotted broom handle. It wasn't much, but it would do. I jammed the broken wood into the lock's crack, pressing it back into place until it looked whole from a distance. In the dark, it might pass, at least until morning. I slipped inside, shut the door gently, and pulled the maid's dress and mask from beneath my shawl. I hid them under the cot, tugging the blanket over them, then hurried into my faded blue gown. By the time the sound of carriage wheels echoed up the drive, I was lying perfectly still. The door creaked faintly as the wind pressed against it, holding, just barely. When the front doors opened downstairs and their laughter filled the hall, I closed my eyes and pretended to dream. I kept my breathing slow, shallow, still pretending to sleep, but my heart was a thunderstorm in my chest. Their voices drifted closer.
Did you see that pathetic servant? I can't believe she dared to spill a drink on Alpha Darek, and then she ran. She should be found and executed.
Larvina sneered. Merva made a sound of agreement, sharp and cold.
Alpha Darek does not tolerate humiliation. Whoever that girl was, her life is as good as over.
I swallowed hard, forcing my eyelids to stay closed. They were talking about me. Then came Merva's command, dripping with superiority.
Avalyn! Avalyn! Come undress us!
Riesla giggled, that same high, mocking sound.
Mother,
She said lightly.
did you forget you locked her in? Give me the key, I'll open it.
I heard the faint jingle of metal as the key changed hands. The lock turned. Then a sudden kick and the sound of splintering wood.
Oops,
Riesla said loudly, her tone theatrical, meant to carry through the hall.
I think I broke the door.
I blinked, startled, and met her gaze. She was standing in the doorway, her lilac gown still sparkling faintly from the gala lights. But her eyes, those soft brown eyes, flicked to mine for only a heartbeat. There was no cruelty there, no triumph, only warning and understanding. I froze, the truth dawning in pieces. She'd seen me. She knew I'd been at the gala. And she was covering for me. Merva's voice called from the corridor, irritated.
Riesla, what was that noise?
Riesla turned toward her, rolling her eyes dramatically.
Nothing, Mother. The lock must have been weak. It just came loose.
Her voice was perfectly casual, the same lazy arrogance she always wore, but I could see the tension in her shoulders. Merva sighed.
Of course it did. That door's as old as the estate. Just make sure it's fixed in the morning.
Riesla glanced back at me once more, her expression unreadable, before saying,
Come on, Avalyn, you heard her. We're waiting.
I nodded, forcing myself to play along. Yes, my lady. As I followed her down the hall, my mind raced. Riesla, my shallow stepsister, had just saved me. Chapter 5. The next couple of days passed quietly, almost suspiciously so. Riesla slipped back into her usual shallow ways, tossing her hair, complaining about gowns, bragging about how many noblemen stared at her during the gala. She never mentioned what she'd done for me. Not a glance, not a hint. Sometimes I caught her looking at me for half a second too long, as if she wanted to say something, but she never did. And I still didn't know why she helped me that night, why she lied, why she covered the broken door and pretended she hadn't seen me at the castle. Stepmother and Larvina remained blissfully unaware. They strutted around the manor retelling the events of the gala with dramatic gestures, conveniently leaving out their daughters being ignored and focusing instead on the pathetic servant girl who embarrassed Alphadarek. The servants whispered the same story in the halls. Each time I passed, their eyes slid away nervously, afraid the cursed girl might rub off on them. Little did they know the servant they mocked had been me. The house moved on as though nothing had happened. But I hadn't. At night, when the candles dimmed and the quiet pressed in around me, my mind drifted back to the coachman. The way he'd listened, the strange softness in his voice when he admitted he was cursed. I still didn't know his name, he didn't know mine, but somehow we shared something. Two people bound by things we didn't choose. His curse real, mine crafted by Merva's hateful hands but no less damaging. His curse isolating him, mine imprisoning me. I wondered if he still thought about me, or if I had already faded into the blur of strangers he carried in his carriage. Sometimes, late at night, I found myself wishing, hoping, that the curse he carried, whatever it was, would be lifted, that he would find freedom, even if I never did. Trouble arrived 2 days later. It came in the form of a royal messenger pounding on our doors at dawn, his voice ringing through the estate like a war horn.
Hear ye! A royal summons from Alphadarek!
The entire manor froze. Servants dropped their buckets. Larvina gasped. Even Merva, who never showed fear, went pale beneath her rouge. The messenger unrolled the scroll and read with booming authority.
By decree of Alphadarek, ruler of the Northern Pack, he has chosen his bride. She bears a crescent-shaped mark on her shoulder, bestowed by the moon herself. An inspector shall visit every household to find the girl. Any who hide her will be punished by law. Prepare for inspection within 7 days.
This was read to every household in the kingdom, and by midday, the entire realm was in chaos. Girls painted crescents on their shoulders in shimmering powders and crushed charcoal. Some even carved the mark permanently into their skin. Mothers dragged daughters into the streets, desperate to show them off. Merchants abandoned their stalls to run home and check their families' shoulders. Healers were overwhelmed with girls who'd branded themselves in hope. None of the marks glowed, none pulsed, none were real. But in the Evermere estate, the real problem was unfolding. Larvina read the summons over and over, her hands shaking. Merva paced, muttering curses under her breath. They weren't stupid. They knew exactly what a crescent mark meant, and who among them had one. No one outside our estate knew I bore the mark. I hadn't left these walls in 4 years. Only Merva, Larvina, Riesla, and the servants had ever seen it. And if a servant whispered the truth, no one would believe them. They'd assume it was an attempt to push me toward royalty. The realization hit the 3 of them at once. Their eyes snapped to me.
You were at that gala,
Merva hissed. Not a question. A verdict. She lunged before I had time to breathe. Her nails raked across my cheek, her rings striking hard and fast.
You cursed little wretch! You sneaked out! You defied me! You dared to seduce the Alpha!
Larvina joined in, shrieking, shoving, slapping any part of me she could reach. Riesla said nothing. She stood off to the side, pale and stiff, hands shaking. She didn't join in, but she didn't help me either. Merva grabbed a fistful of my hair and dragged me down the hall.
You want to be found,
she snarled.
Let's see if he wants a bride covered in bruises.
She shoved me into the cellar stairwell. I tripped, fell hard onto the cold stone, pain exploding up my arm. The door slammed behind me. The lock clicked. Darkness swallowed me whole. For the next 7 days, until the inspector arrived, I knew one thing for certain. I wasn't meant to survive. Larvina and Merva were not content with locking me away. They wanted the mark gone, or me destroyed along with it. The next morning, the cellar door creaked open. Light spilled down the stairs, framing Merva, Larvina, and 2 servants carrying buckets and tools. Their shadows stretched long across the stone floor. Merva's voice was silk over a blade.
Hold her!
Hands grabbed my arms and pinned me to the wall. My heart thundered as Merva knelt, her smile brittle and frightening.
If that crescent ties you to the Alpha, then we simply remove it.
No, please! My voice broke, but they didn't listen. Larvina stepped forward, eyes burning with jealousy. She pressed a heated iron against my shoulder. The pain ripped through me. I screamed as the smell of burning skin filled the cellar. When she pulled the iron away, blistered flesh remained. For a breath, I hoped the mark was gone, but the skin shimmered, healed, whole. The crescent glowed brighter than before. Larvina stumbled back.
What?
Again!
Merva snarled. They scraped at it next. Metal tore through skin until blood dripped down my arm. I sobbed, shaking, but the mark healed faster each time. Then came acid, hissing, burning, horrifying. I screamed until my voice cracked. Again, the skin healed instantly, the crescent shining defiantly. The servants exchanged frightened looks, but Merva only grew more deranged. They tried one last thing, something so cruel I could barely think about it without trembling, and still the mark returned, untouched, glowing like silver fire. Finally, Merva stepped back, chest heaving.
It won't come off,
she whispered.
It cannot be removed.
Larvina backed away as if I were plague.
What is she?
For the first time, they looked at me with true fear. When they finally left, locking the door behind them, I curled on the cold floor, shaking so hard my teeth ached. My breath came in ragged gasps. The mark pulsed, soft but steady, as if reassuring me it wasn't going anywhere. Hours later, when the house fell quiet, I heard the cellar lock turn again, softly this time. A single set of footsteps crept down. Riesla. Hours later, when the house finally quieted, the cellar lock turned again, softly this time. A single set of footsteps crept down. Riesla. She held a small basket against her chest, her eyes swollen from crying or guilt, I couldn't tell. She placed the basket beside me. Bread, water, a cloth soaked in something cool to soothe my burns. She didn't look directly at me. She didn't look at my shoulder.
I couldn't stop them,
she whispered, voice shaking.
But I can do this.
Before I could respond, she hurried back up the stairs, closing the door gently behind her, careful not to let it slam. I stared at the food long after she left, not knowing what to think. Riesla, the girl who laughed at me the loudest, had quietly shown me more kindness than anyone else in this house. I didn't know why she helped me. Just like I didn't know how Alpha Derek found out about my mark. I'd covered it the entire time at the gala. It couldn't be seen through my dress unless it glowed, but I ran before it started glowing, so how? And yet, somehow, he knew. Somehow, the Alpha of the Northern Pack recognized a mark that had been hidden from the entire world for 4 years. The kingdom might call it a blessing. Stepmother called it a curse, and I wasn't sure what it was anymore. The next morning, I was jolted awake by a thunderous crash. For one disoriented heartbeat, I thought Merva had returned to hurt me again. But then I heard it clearly. The unmistakable slam of our front gates bursting open, metal clanging against stone hard enough to rattle the cellar walls. Boots pounded across the courtyard. Horses snorted. Someone shouted orders with the authority of a man used to obedience.
By order of Alpha Darek, Open this household for inspection.
My blood froze. The inspector. Already? But why? The summons said 7 days. I pushed myself up, every bruise from last night aching. Another crash sounded. The inspector hitting the doors again, impatient, powerful. He wasn't just knocking. He was announcing himself like a man used to breaking things open. Above me, Merva snapped into a frenzy.
Servants, move! Open the doors! Now!
Her voice was sharp, with a panic I had never heard before. Servants scattered like startled birds, their feet pounding up and down the hall. The front doors finally groaned open. A blast of cold air swept inside. Then the inspector's boots crossed the threshold, each step heavy, deliberate, carrying the authority of someone who could ruin lives with a single word. Lady Merva switched to her sweetest voice, dripping honey over fear.
Inspector, we weren't expecting you so soon. What an honor.
He didn't return the pleasantry.
Alpha has no patience for delays. Do you have any daughter with the crescent mark?
Merva let out a breathy laugh that cracked.
Crescent mark? Oh, yes, of course, oh dear, I must prepare my daughters. They're not presentable.
She was stalling, desperately. And upstairs, the chaos multiplied. I heard the rapid, frantic shuffling of servants running into Larvina's room, the slam of a wardrobe, the hiss of corset strings being yanked tight. A gasp, then Larvina screeching,
Careful! You'll ruin the paint!
Paint. They were painting a fake crescent on her. I clenched my hands into fists, wrists still bruised from yesterday. Merva had tortured me trying to remove the real mark, and now she was fabricating one for her daughter. Another crash upstairs. Someone knocked over a table. Footsteps scraped, cloth tore. Larvina whimpered as a maid pressed too hard.
Hurry,
She hissed.
if he comes up here.
After endless scuffling and panicked rustling, the house fell silent for a single heartbeat. Then came the click of heels descending the staircase. Larvina, moving slowly, dramatically, as if walking into her coronation. He checked Larvina first. He lifted her chin, examined the mark, and then dragged his thumb across it. The paint smeared instantly. Larvina gasped. Merva stiffened. A servant dropped a tray somewhere in the hall.
Fake.
The inspector said flatly.
Next.
Riesla stepped forward reluctantly. She didn't pretend confidence. She simply exposed her shoulder. A single glance was enough.
Nothing.
He said.
Now, is there any other daughter in this household?
No,
Merva snapped immediately.
just these two.
The inspector stared at her for a long, cold moment.
Strange.
He said slowly.
Records show the Evermere estate registered 3 daughters.
Merva froze. Then, too theatrical to be real, she pressed a hand to her chest and started sobbing.
She ran away years ago, wicked, ungrateful child. We haven't seen her since. Poor thing is probably dead in a ditch somewhere.
The inspector didn't flinch. He simply nodded once.
Very well. If she returns, inform the castle immediately. The Alpha will continue his search.
His boots thudded across the floor. The front door groaned open, then slammed shut behind him. Silence fell. Then hurried footsteps approached the cellar. The lock clicked, and the door swung open. Riesla stood there, breathless.
Run!
She whispered urgently.
Maybe you can catch him before he leaves.
She grabbed my wrist, eyes wide and terrified.
Go! This might be your only chance.
I bolted up the cellar steps and tore through the hallway. Gasps erupted around me as servants and my stepfamily spun toward the sudden blur of me sprinting past. I didn't stop. I didn't breathe. I ran straight for the door. But Merva reacted first. She stepped in front of me, blocking the entrance with the speed of someone fueled by pure panic. Before I could dodge, Larvina yanked my hair back so hard tears sprang to my eyes. She slapped me across the face.
Did you think you could catch him before he left? Look outside. It's too late.
I twisted, heart pounding. But the courtyard was empty. The inspector's horse was gone. Larvina and Merva burst into laughter, sharp, cruel, triumphant.
Pathetic,
Larvina sneered.
Did you really think you'd get chosen? You?
But their laughter died instantly. The front door swung open. The inspector walked back in, eyes widening at the scene. Me pinned by my hair, my cheek burning, my step-family towering over me with guilt written across their faces. He turned to Merva, voice like ice.
Didn't you say there was no other daughter?
Merva froze, then forced a quick smile.
Oh, her. She's just a servant.
The inspector didn't even blink.
Servants are to be examined as well. You said none had a crescent mark. I looked at them myself, and I don't recognize her.
His gaze shifted to me.
Girl, step forward.
Larvina's grip tightened.
No!
She hissed in my ear.
No, no, no!
The inspector's face darkened. Fury rolled off him as he crossed the room in 2 strides. He seized me by the arm, ripping me from Larvina's grasp with so much force she stumbled backward.
Unhand her,
He growled. He pulled back my sleeve. The crescent gleamed. The inspector's breath caught. He rubbed at it, hard. He scraped at it with a gloved fingernail. The mark didn't fade, didn't smudge, didn't even flicker. It only glowed brighter.
Moon chosen,
He whispered. Then his voice rose, sharp and authoritative.
Guards!
2 men stormed in instantly.
Arrest Lady Merva Evermere and her daughters for obstruction of royal investigation.
Merva shrieked. Riesla's face went pale. Larvina burst into hysterics.
Please!
Larvina cried, pointing at her mother and sister.
I'm innocent! It was them! It was them! They're jealous of her! I didn't do anything!
The inspector didn't even look at her. The guards seized them anyway. And for the first time in years, I stood free. Chapter 6. I was immediately ushered into the inspector's carriage, barely given time to breathe. The door slammed behind me, and the horses lurched forward. I need to tell you something, I said quickly. Riesla, she's innocent. She helped me. She freed me. The inspector's stern profile didn't soften, but he nodded once.
Your statement will be noted.
He said nothing else. I didn't push it. The carriage rolled through the village and toward the castle, but this time, I didn't go around back. I wasn't sneaking in. I wasn't hiding behind a tray or a borrowed mask. The carriage turned toward the front, the main gates. Iron filigree arched overhead, carved with crescent moons and wolves. Guards stood in formation as the carriage passed through as if I were royalty. As soon as the wheels stopped, the doors flew open and a flurry of castle maids rushed toward me. Miss, this way, quickly! Her room is prepared.
Heat the bath.
Before I could form a question, they whisked me through tall marble halls, up a winding staircase, and toward a massive set of carved doors. They opened them, and I froze. It wasn't a room. It was a dream. The ceiling arched high above, painted with glowing constellations that shimmered like real stars. Velvet curtains spilled to the floor. In the center stood a bed fit for a queen, 4-posted, draped in silver-threaded silk. A balcony overlooked the kingdom, mountains cutting the horizon. Crystal lanterns floated softly along the walls, bathing everything in warm gold. This is my room, I whispered. The maids didn't even blink. Of course, miss. Now, your bath. They pushed open another door. The bathing chamber was marble and steam, rose petals drifting across hot water. Soft towels, scented oils, and silken robes waited by the tub. I didn't have time to think before gentle hands were undoing my braid, washing my hair, scrubbing away days of pain. They bathed me, rinsed me, wrapped me in silk oils perfumed with jasmine, and moonflower were smoothed into my skin. Someone trimmed my nails. Another brushed my hair until it gleamed. A third measured me for a gown. By the time they led me back to the mirror, I didn't recognize myself. The girl staring back had luminous skin, no dirt, no bruises. her hair falling in shining waves. Her eyes, once tired, sparkled, and the crescent-shaped mark on her shoulder glowed faintly, as if it had been waiting to be seen. "That's me," I whispered, touching my cheek. A knock sounded at the door. The inspector stepped inside and bowed.
Miss, the Alpha wants to see you.
My heart pounded as I stood. I wondered what Alpha Derek was truly like. Rumors painted him as cold, ruthless, and dangerous, but I knew better than to trust gossip. I also wanted to know how he had known about my crescent mark when I had hidden it the entire night. We walked down a long hallway lit by floating lanterns until we reached 2 tall carved doors. The inspector pushed them open, and to my shock, I didn't see Alpha Derek. I saw the coachman. I froze. "Why are you—" But the inspector bowed deeply.
Alpha, we found her. Here she is.
My breath caught. Alpha Derek was the coachman. Then who had been the masked man at the gala? He stepped forward.
I know you're confused. I'll tell you everything.
He dismissed the inspector, who closed the doors behind us.
I'm Darek.
He said quietly.
I'm not a coachman. The council has been pressuring me to choose a wife, but I can't because of my curse. They insisted I attend the Moon Gala to find a suitable match, so I pretended to agree, but I had my coachman dress as me. With masks, no one noticed. Meanwhile, I took the carriage into the village so I wouldn't be recognized.
My chest tightened as he continued.
That's when I met you. You were frightened and trying to pretend to be a servant, but you didn't look like one. No servant carries herself like that, or looks that beautiful.
His voice softened.
I was intrigued. I waited for you to come out. And when you told me everything that night, I wanted to end your stepfamily myself.
I swallowed. What curse? He sighed.
If I touch any woman with my skin, she dies. Instantly. The only exception is my mate. That's why I wear gloves. Why I avoid everyone. I cannot marry or have an heir. But that night, when your stepfamily appeared and you panicked, I saw a crescent mark glowing through your clothes. I have the same one. I knew you could be my fated mate.
His gaze deepened.
I didn't want to risk touching you in case I was wrong. But even if you weren't my mate, I still wanted you beside me.
Something inside me broke open. I had been thinking about him since that night too. His kindness, the way he listened. I stepped closer. "You can touch me."
Avalyn, no.
He whispered.
If I'm wrong, you'll...
I kissed him. His breath hitched. I waited for pain, for death, for anything. I waited for the curse to strike, for the world to burn, but nothing happened. Absolutely nothing. He didn't hurt me. He only stared at me as if everything he ever knew had just been rewritten. Epilogue. Darek and I had the grandest wedding the kingdom had ever seen. Silver lanterns lit the night, wolves howled in celebration, and the moon itself seemed to shine brighter for us. I walked down the aisle wearing a gown stitched with constellations, the crescent mark on my shoulder glowing proudly for all to see. Merva and Larvina were thrown into the dungeon long before the ceremony, where their lies and cruelty could harm no one ever again. Riesla stood beside me as my lady-in-waiting. The night before the wedding, she finally told me the truth. She had always wanted to protect me, she had always wanted to stand up for me. But Merva and Larvina had threatened to kill me if she didn't play along. She chose the only way she could to keep me alive. I forgave her. Because without her small acts of courage, her warnings, her help, I might never have survived long enough to meet my fate. As for Darek, what he once believed was a curse became the greatest blessing of both our lives. His curse forced him into hiding. Mine kept me imprisoned. But together, our marks became proof of something greater, destiny, written in moonlight. If not for the curse, our paths would never have crossed. If not for the curse, he would never have waited for me at the village square. If not for the curse, I would never have kissed him. And if not for the curse, he might never have found his mate. We were bound long before we ever met. What once felt like a sentence became our salvation. and under the silver glow of the moon, hand in hand with my mate, I realized something simple and true. Sometimes the things that break you are the very things that lead you home.